Greetings, one and all, and welcome once more. It's I, Tantisner, your Lord and Emperor, here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. We're talking about tabletop as we usually do on most these days during the week, where I stream live, send up on YouTube, all that sort of thing. And I'm diving back today into, the Sixth World. Yeah, we're talking Shadowrun again. If you'd missed it previously, I did a kind of world tour where I effectively informed you of pretty much every country in the world. Every little region, place, information on that. I visited all the different continents. It's a big one. Go check it out if you want to learn all about that. But what we're doing today, what we're going to do in the future, is I'm going to still go back into that world and visit a few more countries where we know a lot more. Because I can't give you everything that's going to be on all these countries. But take our example for today. I'm going to be talking about Tirnanog. Tirnanog, there are two big, important books which give me a lot of information on it. And I'm going to tell you now, those are the only two books I'm sure the covers of. I always like to talk about them. They're what I'm actually going to be using primarily today. Normally, I do like to use a lot of online wiki sources as kind of outlines and such, but I've gotta say, the Shadowrun Wikipedia has always been kind of a lot of nothing burger. It's great for what I did for when we toured all the continents, because it gave me all the names of a lot of the countries and stuff, sources that I could go to reference these things. And I did grab some information for some of these places as we went through from some of these books. But for deep dives like this, no, it doesn't really give me anything. So I've got to rely on the two books I have here. There's a lot of other books. I actually, if you want to know all the different books you might be able to reference, the places in those books that would give a little bit of information on Tirnanog, I would recommend the Shadowrun Wikipedia for Tirnanog. It's a great place to get started there. This country is mentioned in a lot of places. It's one of the few that are. There are a number of countries that we get showing up a lot. And the Tyr nations, because of their unique nature as the Elven nations, show up a lot. I guess I really should get started talking about it, because that's the best way, but there is one more preface I'm going to put here. Two books I have here are a 3rd edition book and a 2nd edition book. And I've talked about it before, and I will talk about it again. Especially older Shadowrun, or a lot of older RPGs, did not have the same sensibility as the rest of us. I am using a number of images from them. Most of these images are just fine. There will be one that's a little weird that I chose, but I thought it was fine, but it's effectively, I'm using examples from the books here as images because they were the easy images to find online. I actually did find another wiki source that would have given me a lot more on Tirnanog. It was in German. I probably could have translated it a bit better and gone through it a little bit better, but Google Translate isn't it's mostly reliable. I guess it's mostly reliable, and that's something I should reflect upon. But I did feel like just using the actual book sources would be nice, but I used it for a lot of my images that I'll be sharing with you here. So, nothing is meant to be culturally insensitive. I don't know. Some of them might be kind of skirting the line. So I'm just saying that now. Because Tirnanog is the country that came out of Ireland. So, and Irish people have had a lot of, insensitivity towards them over the years. So, nothing that I am going to reflect upon today is meant to be insulting to them. It's meant to discuss what is put in these two books. Consider that while we're getting into 4th, 5th, and 6th edition, the timeline has advanced, things have evolved, but generally speaking, most of this information should be fine. And I am going to be focusing on the book Shadows of Europe. Let me show those books so we can talk about it. That's probably a good idea, as I mentioned this. So, there's a shot, small images. This is Shadows of Europe book. This is the 3rd edition book. This is when we're getting into improvements in the way that Shadowrun displays a lot. I feel like by the time we get to 3rd edition, we are getting more of, I don't want to say adult, but better ways of themes and displaying it. So, Shadows of Europe is the book that I'm primarily relying on, and the other one then is the Tirnanog book from 2nd edition. This is where I was able to capture a lot of images online from that wiki page. Which, can I find that wiki page? Do I have that very quickly that I can access that? Is there a translation? There might be, but this is the wiki page. I'm just on it now. I'll put it here just to show everybody here. If you read German, this is probably going to be a very good source if you don't have the books for information, or if there's the translation stuff here. No, this is not the right one. Shoot. This is not the right one. There's another one that I was using. Give me a second. I'm going to turn this off and go to the right wiki page. The right wiki stuff that I was talking about. Is that one? There's a long form one. Ah, here it is. Yeah. Sorry. So this is the one. It's Shadowrun.de Tirnanog. You know, I would recommend checking this one out. As I said, look at it. It goes through a lot of stuff here, and it's got all the second edition images. So, you know, it is probably, if you can translate it, a good source of information. Other than the things. I mean, look, those are the best images you can find online for the books. Not gonna lie, they don't show up very well. The book images are very tiny. Most like I tried looking outside the Wikipedia source for them. They're just all tiny. Oh, I want to actually do the flag. And the flag is tiny. Let me do the bigger version of it. Yeah. So that's Tirnanog flag. Let's go over some basics of Tirnanog just to give you some information. The basic information about it: it is a theocratic republic. It's just shy of 4 million people, of which about 42% are human and 46% are elf. So that's the big thing you have to think about here: is Tirnanog is majority elf. And it is important to note that this is from a combination of immigration, and the fact is that, for whatever reason, more elves are born in Tirnanog than any other place. That doesn't mean there aren't others. Yeah, you work with what you get. There are orcs, trolls, others, dwarfs. It's just that they are in much shorter, smaller population. In a lot of places in the world, you tend to have a very huge human population, and then the other 4 tend to be very low. This is one of the few exceptions where nearly just shy of half the population is elf in this country. About 9% of the country is sinless. Let's see here. There's only about 22 below the poverty line. Only 14% corporate affiliation. For education, for less than 12 years, only 9%. High school equivalent, about 51%. So about half the population gets about high school, that. 26% gets college degrees, and 14% get about advanced degrees. So it is a very educated country. It's a very well-controlled country. There's not as much corporate influence. There's not as much poverty. Again, there's a lot of poverty in a lot of places in the world. So, you know, and this, again, could be improved, less improved. We're talking a timeline that takes us into the 2060s. This is 3rd edition, and we're in, like, the 2070s, 2080s. So it's another 10, 20 years. A lot can change in that time period. English is the major language, though Irish Gaelic and Irish Saphirial are big languages that are also spoken. About a little bit more than a third of the population speaks the Irish version of Saphirial, and about 20% of the population speaks Irish Gaelic, but then 95% speak English. They use the punt is their language, is their currency, though Euro and Nuyen have limited acceptance. A punt is about 0.7 Nuyen, and 1 Nuyen is approximately, backwards, I think there would be about 1.7 punt. Most folks there are Celtic, 80% ethnically, 16% English, and 4% other. Your major religions in the country are Path of the Wheel, Church of Ireland, Roman Catholic, and then some unidentified and stuff. And the major medical coverage is done by Guarantee, is an unnamed group that does medical coverage, but you know it's the only one in control. So there is a group that controls it, you know. Again, I recommend if you want to look up. Here's the thing I complain about Shadowrun books, especially older ones. They are not formatted well for trying to get information out. So, if you want to read in depth Shadows of Europe and the Tirnanog books, go ahead, but they're very much similar to White Wolf older books, where they have a lot of, like, in-universe words being spoken and things like that. So I'm going to try my best here to summarize these things without going into depths about these, and it's not always easy. So let's talk about the basic timeline of Tir na nog, because that's another good bit of information there. And we'll do the image here for the country, just showing what it looks like. So, between the 2010s and 2020s, there was a lot of Elven birth, right, in the area, which accounted for about 41% of the births. It is a little worse than World of Darkness, I'm not gonna lie. Especially older books. They got better, but older books were good. So pronouncements made prior to the MH Day weakened the Irish faith in the Catholic Church. In 2011, Ireland loses about 22% of its population to the Vitus plague. So, again, that's about a quarter of your population you lose. That's huge. There's flooding, seismic shocks, and storms that hit the eastern coasts. Formians are first sighted in the coconuts. There's shifts in a lot of the nature of things. The regrowth of the western forest, regeneration of sig roads occur. So this is 2011. So this is like our timeline 12 years ago, but this is like the 2010s. This is when Vitus hits, when the population just dropped. Magic's coming back. We already had seen some stuff about it. This is the big thing. In 2011, the IRA destroys British SAS base in Belfast with the existence of magic. In 2014, the British House of Commons passes the Act of Dissolution. Irish and British governments sign a Treaty of Galway 1 week later, creating a united free Republic of Ireland. So basically, the IRA gets old Celtic magic and uses it on Britain, and basically Northern Ireland is broken away. In 2015, there's talks between the Dublin government and the Derry IRA. Liam O'Connor's Spike Baby Elven heritage is revealed. There's a schism between humans and elves and humans of the IRA. Humans succeed to form the official IRA. Elves form the provisional IRA. The official IRA breaks off Toff. The provisional lays groundwork for the Tir Republican Corps, the TRC. Now, we get into 2015 to 2034. There's corruptive scandals that rock the government during this time period, numerous sex and prostitution scandals, ensnare Catholic priests and bishops. There's weakening of authority in both and a turning point on public opinion against the Catholic Church. The 4 volumes of Walking the Light appear. So a lot of stuff is happening. There's a lot of problems with government, with the church, with religion. There's a lot of problems going on during this time period, tumultuous time periods. We're still the United Free Republic of Ireland. We get to June of 2034. State President Charles Goldrick, apologies if I butcher any names, is impeached after implications in illegal surveillance of political opponents, via phone tapping and other instances of widespread corruption. Power passes to the state president, Amon McCarthy. On December 11th of 2034, McCarthy asked Liam O'Connor and the TRC to impose a state of emergency. O'Connor subsequently pushes through many constitutional changes, weakening the Dáil, strengthening the Senate, and cutting the local government powers. In 2534, on December 25th, 2034, Seamus O'Kennedy broadcasts on the Tritio the renaming of Ireland to Tir na nog. So it was December 25th, 2034, Ireland becomes Tir na nog. And this is basically after we had our, this big thing, impeached the president, got a new one in, and this one is in with the TRC. Who, remember, this is part of it's a very complex thing, because we had the normal Irish government, and we had the IRA, and the IRA then split between humans and elves IRA, the Elven one becoming more an official group, the TRC, And now the TRC has basically gained a lot of control of the country, renamed it Tir na. In 2035, March of that year, Edmund McCarthy resigns, Liam O'Connor becomes state president. The Dodon families are given increased control over the economy, which we'll talk about the Dodon families because they're going to be an important part of Tir na, but we're hearing about them for the first time. In 2035 to 2044, the Constitutional Act outlines Tir citizens' rights and responsibility and shifts balance of power from the Dal to the Senate. I'm probably butchering some of these here. In 2041, Liam O'Connor marries Brain Day of Conwright. She's made persona of the Court of Stewards. In 2042, O'Connor's elected High Steward. In 2043, Liam O'Connor disappears. Lady Brain Day proclaims herself Rian Queen of the Seelie Court. James O'Brien is named state president, and William O'Dunn becomes High Steward. So this is a restructuring of the government, and I'm going to say I don't know enough about the original Irish government to know when it's restructured in such a way to talk about it, and I would recommend some of this requires you to do research on what that is to understand it, but just understand we're getting a massive restructure. And if you know about the Irish government, great. Just maybe explain it personally down below in the comments. That's a thing to add in here. Just for anybody that is interested, if you or Google it a little bit. Anyway, next big thing is 2057. Well, Dunkelzane, our good old dragon, becomes a president. His will, because he's dead now, offers the first key of power to the government of Tarngray or Tir na, whoever discloses the personal hierarchies of its high officials first. Neither step forward. So basically, they're like, the will's like, hey, if you want this very powerful item, say something about your people. Then we get 2061, which we have Halley's Comet becoming visible naked eye. A series of magical storms pelt Cornoth and Neath, and the God, I'm gonna try to butcher this one. Dedanan, Droidhail venture to the inland of countries Kerry, Sligo, Derry, and Antietam. I probably butchered those a lot, so apologize. Again, pronouncing things not my strong suit a lot of times. I try. Other magical manifestations are reported down the Great Karn line. The veil wraps and prevents entrance or exit for the space of a week. And there's a surge affects 10% of the population, elf and non-elf alike. In 2061, there's concentrations of orichalcum found in the Tarna zinc mine. I find it endearing. Some of you do. And you do, at least. In County Meath and Ross Island, copper mine in County Kerry. So basically, in a zinc mine and a copper mine, orichalcum, which is a magical metal, appears. The Dodon families fight amongst themselves for mining rights. Again, they're a major important part about this. They're a financial part about this entire thing. We'll talk about them. May 2062, comet fever dies around the world, and there's discovered that the magical nature of Tir na has been permanently altered. The veil works erratically, mana flares and ebbs near cairns and monoliths, and astral constructs fade in and out of the material world on a regular, unpredictable basis, which shocks many of the citizens of the country. On November 2nd of 2062, the official IRA, hey, we remember them. We haven't heard about the official IRA since 2015. Attacks and disrupts the Samhain observance. The Unseelie Court is suspected behind the resurgence of the official IRA activities against the Tir government. Because this is a Seelie Court and the Unseelie Court. Remember, the wife of the person that had been important, became the head of the Queen of the Seelie Court. Now there's the Unseelie Court. Maybe they're behind this, kind of disrupting the government, because it's a triple power play of 3 different groups, basically. There's a lot of groups vying for power within Tir na, and you just have to think about that, too. You have the actual government, the Seelie Court, the Unseelie Court, the Dodon families, and that's just the major players that we have, all vying for power and manipulating and doing stuff to each other. It's a mess. And our last thing on the timeline, as of 3rd edition, so I can't say what has been added in 4th edition, 5th edition, or 6th edition, because, yes, in May of 2063, the Tir government accepts provisional membership into the NEEC. because of both rising external and internal pressure. And for those of you on our bingo cards here, if you remember the NEEC, do you? I hope you do. The New European Economic Community. Basically, for Europe is the European Union didn't work out very well because of a lot of shit that happens in Europe. But this is basically a successor to the European Union that's in existence within Europe, and it's much more economic, but still has some, defensive kind of things. It's a re-evolved version of it because of everything that happened there. Remember, the European Union was the thing, in the 90s where these books came out, so it's mentioned, the Euro was a big part of it. It's just that, shit happens. Similar to the US, the European Union breaks apart. A lot of countries have a lot of issues. Now the NEEC is the basic successor to that. And yeah, Tirnanog joins it in 2063 because shit's going on. Magic's got out of whack. Things going on. There's a lot of chaos going on. And we are seeing this change in stuff. Yeah. All right. Whew. So let's talk about the provinces that you can find and locations of it. Let's go over some basic information. So I definitely recommend, if you're going to look into more detailed information on the provinces and counties and some of the major cities and locations in Tirnanog, you get the Tirnanog book from 2nd edition. There's some issues about the way the language is displayed just because of some things with the way of how language was done in the 90s. It's just display, language, things like that. So other than that, it should be a pretty fine thing to check out. And again, this will be most information, but I wanted to go over some basics, of the different provinces. Leinster province is the easternmost one, the eastern seaboard. It's kind of north of Ulster. It's the most prosperous and populous of the regions. A lot of green fields, purple mountains, rural landscape, commuter towns, public transportation of Dublin. This is the kind of first world in the sixth world kind of location you could think. This kind of county here. Mega corporations that are in the country have their headquarters here, suppliers, farmers, and businessmen. This place is the Irish hospitality as you know it in the Tirnanog, in the sixth world, kind of brought forth. It is probably one of the nicer of all the provinces you can talk about. Not to say that you can't find nice and wonderful things here, but when we talk about the traditional, what would be more comparable to the, traditional nice parts of, friendly parts of Ireland you find nowadays, this is it to a T. Anyway, if you guys want to dive into the different counties, into notable sites, things like that, there's a lot of stuff in that book. It still works pretty well. Munster, as a province, let's talk about that one too. It's got the bustling city of Cork, some craggy coastlines, the Shannon River that kind of slices through it. The thing about this thing is that Munster, and amongst all the other ones, because the southwest corner of Tirnanog is kind of separated out physically by a lot of material from mountains, rivers, bogs, that kind of things. Natural terrain separates it out. It is the largest of the provinces, but it also has the smallest population. And one of the things that has retained from old times is a reputation amongst the people for poetry, craftsmen, and, philosophy. So Munster is a place that you would go for that kind of things. Philosophy, the facts of it, poetry, craftsmanship have always been very important on the people here. And there are still courts of poetry that are done within the province. And so people like the Magic Order Brigade tend to preside over a lot of these. But there are other sponsors that will have these poetry courts that you can go and see in amongst this area. So it is an artistic region where not as much population as many others. Kind of almost separated itself out by a little bit by natural ways. Connaught, I hope I'm not butchering that one, is the land of learning, storytelling, and judgments. As it's one of the western provinces. Followers of the Elven paths and non-Elven druids converge there for enlightenment amongst the wild landscape. It's got it's kind of described as a savage garden with mountains, lakes, oceans, dagger-shaped blades, a lot of colors, mist, drizzle, magic, natural landscapes, very kind of deep in here. this is a place that's a little bit more isolated naturally. Though, like, Munster, as I talk about it, is kind of separated because of natural barriers. It's not a place that the people feel separated. There's a kind of place that the people, the area, is more isolated in a lot of ways. And this isolation can be both good and bad. It's got a lot of freedom, but also things like, mental illnesses and alcoholism tend to be a problem there. The Gilchata, a protected area where Gaelic is the first language, still is part of here. There's some areas that cling to the old Ireland's human traditions, but there have been some conflicts between humans and elves within this area. Conflicts between the elven magic users and druids and stuff, and non-elven druids, because there are elven druids, have happened a lot too. So, probably you have the elven druids, the mediators between those two groups as best they can, but it doesn't mean that there's not conflicts there, because the druids have a lot of tradition there too in this area. They still have their meetings in the wilderness in this area, and manage to get out of the way of, elven conjured spirits from noticing what's going on. So there is a little bit of a traditional conflict there. Maith is a result of the reunification of Ireland and the birth of Tir na Nog. The Dadan elves, the Dadan family, who I will talk about a little bit more before the end of the day, basically created the province of Meath to define a kind of heart of the Awakened Lands, a new area too. It is a new province on paper. It took some counties from Ulster and some from Ballon Leinster and created a new province. So, because, again, when we're talking about this now, especially and even into the future, it's like the 2060s to 2080s, and this was around 2035 that this was created. There are plenty of old humans and old human families, again, because humans is still a pretty big part of the population, even though, elves are pretty big in Tir na Nog, that still have that four-province mindset for Tir na Nog. But, plenty of them have kind of moved beyond that, and elves and metahumans do accept this. There's a fifth province now. Tara, the ancient seat of the High Irish Kings, is within this territory, and a lot of influence of the Dadan families is felt there. The newly built palaces at historic sites, and the Dadan government spreads its rule through Tir from here. So the Dadan part of the government exists from this location. Then we finally have Ulster, the final of them. Ulster is a location that has a lot of reputation to it, because Ulster is where we would have Northern Ireland. And there's a history of violence, of warrior people and things like that, and certainly, it's this unfortunate part about Ulster is that there is the reputation of great legendary heroes, warrior women, powerful fighters, and there is this kind of combative history to the people of Ulster. But it shows itself in very negative ways, certainly with things like the, IRA and a lot of stuff that happened with them and stuff like that, and the evolution of them since things changed within Tir na Nog. And hello and welcome. Certainly there are a lot more changes in the way things happen now. The current group that we kind of look at right now, within this, there are still remnants of what was originally the human side of the original IRA existing there in a form. I talked about them in the history a little bit. I talk about it occasionally. And still there are some events and stuff that happen here. It's not to say that this isn't a land without the threat of violence and people that would commit things like terrorism still. It's more controlled, and, if you're going to see anything that's destabilizing here, it's within Ulster. It's just an unfortunate thing that even after this reunification, all the changes, all the evolution of what was once Ireland to Tir na Nog has meant that the old hatreds and angers have changed and transferred a lot now. And it just means that there still is disenfranchised people in this region. It's just when they almost got what they wanted, they didn't also. And it's just the changes have been too much. And for them, too rapidly, which is kind of understandable in a lot of the world with Shadowrun, the Sixth World. So a lot of things changed very rapidly. And so you can understand why they have some anger here. And, certainly now it's no longer Catholics versus Protestants as much anymore. It's now, a little bit more united between those. So it's no longer as much the religious tensions, too, that were kind of part of, Ireland versus Northern Ireland. It's a lot more subtle, nuanced, different, but it still exists there in Ulster. So just keep that in mind if we talk about Ulster and definitely, and second edition could be very nicer in the way they talk about things. Playing more magical things, old cairn mines, sleek roads, a lot of interesting places have come to existence. And if you want to dive into some cities, and get some more information on similar, I had a video on Seattle, if you want to check those out, where I did a streaming video on Seattle. I could probably go into depths in the Tiernan book on two other cities, Dublin and Belfast. But I'm going to keep those out and just say, if you want to look into them a little bit more, I would recommend the Tiernan book from 2nd edition. It will give you a general idea about it. And again, it's 20, 30 years out of date, but it gives you a good idea about how it changed. And certainly speaking, you can probably get some updates from various sources other than that for how they've altered and evolved. And just knowing how the general Shadowrun society of the Sixth World has evolved in those years would help you basically take steps to evolve these cities in a positive direction, or the direction you want to go. So, but that's the regions there. I wanted to go over that. So let's talk about the two courts and the government of Tiernan, because this is an important part about here to talk about the Seelie court, the Unseelie court, and the government of it. Before we talk about the government, we're also going to start talking about some other people and some other important stuff. But I can also mention that, the Path of the Wheel is the spiritual kind of religion that you have. I'm not going to go too much into depths about the Path of the Wheel, but before we kind of get into this, it should be mentioned because it's almost like, for the Dawn families, other Elven folk, magic is an important part. It's a spiritual part of it in the Elven society. And that's where the Path of the Wheel comes in, the Mes T Dracis in Sephiria. So in the Shadows of Europe, you can look over the past, the magical order side of it, the kind of a little bit of the religious side of it. But again, it's not organized the best it could be, but it's there. So, at the heart of this all, there is the two courts. I just had to mention that because these two courts relate to this entire thing, because remember, I said that Tiernan is a theocratical republic. This is the important part about it all, as we talk about it here. And the Seelie and Unseelie courts are, important parts of it. And yeah, welcome anybody that's showing up here. I'm sorry I can't add in too much for new people that are watching us live. But, it's also recording up for YouTube. The Seelie court is kind of like the heart of this kind of mystical side of things and all of the government things. And does link to, the fairy tales of Fae and stuff, the mythical court, the king and queen of the fairies. It's a spiritual guide. That's what the Seelie court is supposed to be. But it also is an important part of the government, too, but it's also not technically in the government. It's a weird part about this entire thing. The Seelie court basically aids the Dawn in walking the ways and the paths. It supposedly holds no power in Tiernan, but its edicts are given a lot of weight. So it's sort of like that thing of the Seelie court is technically not in the government, but when they say something, important stuff happens. And the decrees that it does give are basically treated as law in a way. The actual location of the Seelie court is weird. Rumors are that it's not in the physical world, it's somewhere else. But wherever it is, it's not really known. Of course, Lady Dane or Brain Day leads the court as its queen, or Rian. We know that she was married to Liam O'Connell for 2 years, and then he disappeared, and made her the Prion of the Council of Stewards. But nobody knows it's unknown why she was chosen. A nobody from a non-Danon family. But she has spiritual authority now over all of Tirnanon. So, fairies are the rest of the court, though. So there's elves. There's Munchkins, Leshies, Redcaps, Sprites, Dryads, Grugak, and other fey creatures. Including things that are akin to spirits, or even free spirits. There are some elves that have renounced the physical world to live in the Seelie, also supposedly there. So it is a pretty major power player this time. More mysterious is the Unseelie court. We're talking about the Seelie court. That sounds mysterious. A strange religious part of a pseudo-religious organization that can basically dish out decrees spiritually that can also function as laws in the country, where it's unknown whether exists, combining a number of elves, a mysterious newcomer, fays, spirits, and other beings into one group. That sounds really mysterious, but now we have the Unseelie court. According to how the Seelie talk, the Unseelie are terrible, immoral monsters intent on undermining Tyr and ending civilization, which is kind of right. The Seelie represents a wide range of metatypes, political and spiritual beliefs that are united and intent on disposing the autocratic and elven supremacy system and replacing with something more egalitarian. So, the Unseelie court is basically the opposite end of it, and the Seelie court is the religious side, which supports this kind of semi-autocratic elven superiorist system in Tirnanon, and they want something that's basically everyone. It's more an network than an organization, that they work together to unseat the Danon from power. There's militant polyclubs, Celtic druids, some within the Danon families that feel like the country should be more egalitarian, and they connect connections to those outside of Tyr that have other connections to things like anti-fascist groups and stuff like that. So it's a mysterious kind of group there. Let's talk about the government, because if we talk about the Seelie court and the Danon families, which we'll talk about in a minute after this, we should at least say it, and it's Tirnanon is nominally the democracy. It's very autocratic, it's got a lot of religious power there, but it's technically a democracy. The voting age minimum is 24, and allows you to vote for the president and 22 members of the Dial. The 55-member Senate is made up of appointees and those elected by special interest groups, concerning things such as businesses, cultural, metahuman populations. The Taosich, I'm butchering this one, Prime Minister, and Senate have a nepotism system where they vote and appoint each other, basically taking power out of people's hands. So, the Senate, the 55 part, that thing, they're on its own, very nepotism, very outside of thing, but the president and the Dial is the A with a line over IL, DA thing over IL, probably butchering that heavily, you know. And that's the problem, is the Dial has lost a lot of power. It has some still, but lost a lot of it to the Senate. And, you know, so we get a vote for the president, we get a vote for the one part of government, but, like, you know, then the other is apprised of, you know, special interest groups and stuff, which then, you know, they elect each other, nepotism, a lot of problems there. Yeah. Alright. We have some more things to talk about. We've gone through a good chunk of this, but here's an image that I thought was interesting. It was in one of the images on there. It's the, you know, drunken angry elf. You know, actually, I don't like this image. I was going to use this one, but no. Let's go over here and just combine these two together. I don't know. I think it's fine, but also, like, I'm also like, maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm a kid of the 90s more than anything, so it's sometimes hard to, you know, purse this thing now. So we'll walk away from that one and just use this one for the next two sections. I don't know. I don't think it's terrible, but also, like, there's someone out there that might be insulted by that. I'm trying not to be insulted by that image. It's the unfortunate thing that, this is 90s imagery. I did talk about it. So, the Dadan families. Tier life is heavily influenced by this group. There is probably not a single bit of access, single bit of influence over anybody's lives that doesn't have the Dadan families in them. From the Senate to the Seelie court, to the culture, to business, they have their fingers in everything. There are 22 families. Provinces they date. There are in each of the provinces which ones they dominate in there. So kind of like I can divide them up. I can mention all the families, but keep in mind that there are these 22 families that have influence in a lot of provinces that they dominate. And 8 of them belong to the Dan Moor, or the Inner Circle. So there are 22 overall, but there are 8 which are even deeper into the Inner Circle. Primary power within each of these families rests in its elders, and secondary with its stewards. Elders have the final say over who would be the family steward, and represent them in the Council of Stewards. And those aren't easily replaceable. I'll list in the provinces who's in charge. The Cornouts has the Burke, the McNamara, the O'Brien and O'Connor. The O'Brien and O'Connor are part of the Inner Circle. In Leinster is the Fitzgerald, MacMaron, O'Brien, and O'Toole. The last 3 are in the Inner Circle. In Meath is O'Connor, O'Doone, O'Kennedy, and O'Malley. Munster is Butler of Ormonde, Fitzgerald, McCarthy, O'Kennedy, O'Sullivan, and Roach. McCarthy is part of that Inner Circle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 more. Those are there. In Ulster is Duffy, MacDonald, McSweeney, McGuinness, O'Donnell, and O'Neill. And the O'Donnell and O'Neill are the 2 members of the Inner Circle. So, yeah, there you go. That's where they are and where they're kind of positioned. Sometimes the elder is also a steward, which then is the prince or primo, which is mixed duties outside of council's doing. The council is a steward comprised of 30 members, 2 members from each of the Don Moor, and 1 from each of the remaining families. So that's how they kind of split it out. Remember, I said there's 22 families, 8 of which are the Inner Circle. They get 2 members, the Inner Circle. They serve from 1 to 5 years, depending on the family's wishes. They're all Elven. Human family members aren't granted that privilege. Meetings take place at a mystical rather than a physical Tara, a ritual meeting space created through symbolism and one of the great spirits of the elements somewhere in the country of Meath. If meetings occur when necessary to decide matters regarding the Senate. Full conclave, where highly important council matters are decided regularly on the equinoxes, with members wearing full ritual regalia, with the great spirit of Tuath present. So basically, the Senate is then influenced by the Don families, who basically have the real power behind them, which then, so you can see, it's all connected here. Who else do we have? We do have the Celtic Druids here. They are mostly human, and are best passively resisting Elven rulership. They don't really have any real sort of power in Tir na Nog. The average tier citizen feels more comfortable with druids rather than the elves in charge. Elves go on about stewardships in the land. Druids are there in the dirt. And I think druids are very common folk. So as though they don't really have power, they do have an influence over it. And they are not 100% human, but are mostly human. So it's sort of like, a little bit there. Old archaeology said that, Druid rule, that they were human, but elves weren't around during that time period, so that kind of thing. We can talk about Druids and their spiritual and magical abilities, but we're not going to. There's some underground root groups like the official IRA I talked about, the Catholic Church, which still has some influence. The official IRA was kind of disorganized, pale organization when it broke apart, from the original one. But with the Unseelie court apparently influencing them, there's money, other helping them out, they've kind of rebuilt a little bit. Liam O'Connor basically tried to get rid of the Catholic Church in a way, systematically deprogrammed it, weakened its hold on the Irish people, added into the new religion that we talked about. But still, the Catholic Church has some influence there. The Church of Ireland kind of combined with them a little bit and helped in that regard, so there's still some religion there, and that still does have an importance. They couldn't get rid of them completely. Corporations in the Tir na Nog are, in a sense, under Dadan control. Tier subsidiaries of international megacorporations don't escape this control. 51% of shares must be government owned. And there are also areas of business which the Dadan family has control, just completely, like agriculture, banking, baked goods, transportation, communication, media, where no outside influence are. So corporations do exist here, mega corporations do, but usually it's sort of like, you're a subsidiary of us, you might have control from, like, the majority control of the subsidiary is owned by the Dadan family, but you are still a subsidiary connected to us, so we can do very easy business to you. The biggest megacorporate affiliation pair is Renraku, the Elian Tier household in the, by Patrick O'Connor, led by that group. And Orhalcom has basically increased industry in Tier a lot and kind of like harvesting and made it very important. So there's a lot of groups that would want to get into this. Magic metal is very important. There were a bunch of gangs. Some organized crime has been popping up lately. So yeah, those are some of the power players that we can talk about within Tir na Nog. I'll take the same image. Switch. I'll take a drink from the switch here. Alright. I mentioned magic's going weird. Haley's Comet has kind of like mess with stuff. There's veils, storms, madness, all kinds of stuff going on. So I was really going to talk about this a little more. We'll just kind of go over it a little bit here. Just some things have been kind of weird as of lately. So the magical construct, the veil, was originally something that was a construct, but it's taken a life of its own. A swirl of fog and chaos that rings Ireland approximately 12 to 18 kilometers from the coastline. It descends from its 20-kilometer height above the sea level to just above the water. It confounds naval vessels and similar battles of the Bermuda Triangle. It thickened during Halley's Comet, almost was a wall, nearly impenetrable. This calcification occurs in intermittent lengths along it, trapping airborne or seaborne vessels within it either way until it be forced to open. So the veil, which was this kind of magical protection, kind of changed. There's other magical phenomena. The Dioan dry to hail, the standing storms, magical storms, were kind of near the coastline and near powerful cairn sites and have kind of moved around now a lot more. So things have been changing magically. Alright. To finish up, we will talk a little bit about society and culture within Tir na Nog. Just a little bit. We're not going to go full in the depths. Again, I would recommend either of the tier books if you want to go into a little bit more. But we'll go over some things here, too, about it. Yeah. So, let's talk about the legal methods of ending Tir na Nog, because that's probably the first one. Because if you leave or enter Tir na Nog, no one does that without Dadan family knowledge. Someone's going to know. O'Toole Transcom owns and operates the buses, trains, planes, and other forms of transportation on the island. They have power over the media and telecommunications. And they're adept at getting out the word of your arrival. So, if you manage to make it onto the short list of someone that's not great, well, yeah. Aer Lingus is the airline that has all domestic and international air travel, with airports in Dublin International, Shannon International at Dublin and Limerick, respectively. There are visitors, students, work, and immigration visas that can be available. Illegally is a bit of a different thing, and it's whoever you deal with. Catholic, Protestant, pagan, atheist. You'd probably want to be connected with the Unseelie court if you can get in there legally. They're the ones that probably smell. So, laws. because there are 4 different forms of laws that exist within the country, depending on your need: cultural, environmental, racial, and religious. Cultural law makes it illegal to make money off of destroy, distort, or reproduce any of tier heritage. So, don't mess with your heritage. Environmental laws are fines or jail time for pollution. The racial laws under the Constitutional Act forbids discrimination, but allows loopholes for a rampant abuse. The burden of proof is on the plaintiff in many of these cases, and the religious laws, a tier citizen is free to adhere to any religion he chooses, so long as it does not threaten the integrity and stability of the state or the religious freedoms of other tier citizens. Again, it's sort of there, but also not sort of there. The Garda handles tier law enforcement in general, functions as civil police. The tier Republican Corps comes from them, elite, kind of a secret police of the state. The TRC is the more dangerous. The Garda policeman might carry a pistol in his car, but the TRC goon will have a full arsenal and has the unlimited search and seizure and arrest powers. The Reach Fuel Each is a subunit of the TRC. 36 elves who are dedicated to the protection and defending of the stewards. All are adepts of the path of the warrior. The tier military is relatively small and is completely voluntary, and is approximately 75% human, and the ones you'll most likely face in smuggling prevention or quelling demonstrations of widespread civil unrest. So, it's another way that, in a country that's become very elf-dominated for the huge human population, if you volunteer for the military, you're in good with the government. You're in a good, better space. And, you've increased yourself. It's one of the ways that, there technically isn't this kind of... Again, it's the thing that the racial laws are rampant with abuse here. That they don't want, to discriminate against elves and stuff. And with elf-dominated society, it just sees it a lot more. It's an unfortunate issue as part of the entire thing that, you don't get away from in general. Not a lot. Alright, is there anything else we want to hit on here before we're done? I'm just going to take a look quickly at the Tyrannog book, just to see if there's anything else on it. I think we've hit on most of the things we want to talk about. So let me do this. Let me throw myself back over here, and let's finish up for today. This took a little bit, but again, I wanted to give as much as I could from these 2 books to give you a good information on Tyrannog and their society, their history, how they've evolved, the country that was formerly Ireland and what it's become now. This country that has evolved, and certainly there are still issues with the country. We can see that the government that took over, the influence of these powerful families, these things that are happening here, have made changes which are both good and bad to the country. And there are people that wish to fix it. Now, the Unseelie court doesn't necessarily go about this in the best of ways. It's sort of like, you got 2 groups which are doing bad, which is going to be the one you're going to kind of get in with a lot of times. You never know. There is no good guy in this case. And there really rarely is a good guy in a Shadowrun world, in the 6th world. Most of the time, you got to take what's best for you. And the average citizen of Tyrannog probably doesn't care about any of this stuff. They got their fine lives. They live out their lives just as fine. They've existed here. They've went through a lot of stuff, various deaths, crashes, and stuff like that, and have come out stronger for it. Since it is a much smaller country than a lot of other ones, and a country that is an island, they have been able to survive and evolve much better than many other places. They don't have to worry about borders, neighbors, issues like that kind of thing, wars between themselves, battles. It's the fact that they've become more united. Maybe not always agreeing on the ways to be united, but more united than they ever were. And yes, things happen. There are problems. But as countries go, especially in Shadowrun in the 6th world, it's not the worst place you could be at. Certainly not. And, if you're an elf, you could probably immigrate there. If you're something else, Maybe part of a family with an elf? Maybe. I don't know. It's not out of the world to immigrate there. But visiting, legally or illegally, happen. Just, depends on who you're dealing with. And, big warning, don't piss off the Dadan families. Stay out of their way. Because we're talking about families that, they might have some rivalries with each other, but they know where to handle things, and Tirnog is theirs more than anybody else's. Plenty of people that all have those hands in the pie of control of this country. It's a mess of ownership and democracy. But anyway, that'll be it for today for this. So if you're watching live on Twitch, just stick around for a little while afterwards. But for those of you on YouTube, thank you for joining me. Hey, if you're on Twitch, follow me. If you're on YouTube, well, a subscription would be very nice. A comment. Have you done anything with Tirnog in any of your Shadowrun games? Or any of those questions. How would you compare how our world's version of Ireland and this world version have changed, especially with the government? Since the Tirnog government evolved out of this one. I'm curious about it because there is a big part of that historical side in Tirnog, with the evolution of the government out of there. Granted, with the Seelie courts, Unseelie courts, the Dadan families, and all that stuff kind of added in, but still. Also for YouTube side, things like, leaving like, ring bell, all those things that give support. Yeah, great. If you want to check out more tabletop stuff, wherever you're at, my tabletop schedule is Tuesdays, Thursdays, early afternoons. Usually random stuff on Tuesdays, Thursdays is more Pathfinder, Olirant stuff. Saturdays in the morning, mostly World of Darkness stuff, usually pretty exactly around 11 o'clock, just because of my schedule on Saturdays. Other tabletop stuff, Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Crimson Queen. Check that out. It's my live play, Pathfinder 1st Edition. Really fun. Great players. We're technically playing through the Crimson Queen, or Curse of the Crimson Throne, for the Crimson Queen, but we've changed it in a lot of ways. It's really fun. Really recommend it out. Good role playing. And of course, Saturdays at 6 p.m. for discussing it. I have social medias, Discord, Twitter.com. Those are the ones right now. I leave a lot of pictures, random updates, schedule stuff, all those things there. And I think that's all the stuff to give a shout out for. I try to remember all that stuff, but hey. Anyway, those of you on YouTube who are joining me, I say thanks to you. And of course, the same to you on Twitch. But for now, I say to you out there, farewell, goodbye. And until the next time we talk about Shadowrun or something else, I bid you a farewell. Alright, Twitch. Just you and me now. YouTube's going to say goodbye. We'll cut out the middle of the video in that entire thing, since I'll figure out how to cut it out. Hey, I went over stuff twice here. This didn't go too bad. I think we did well for everything I could put together. Today was Tuesday. I gotta get running. I got some things to do. In like 15 minutes, I want to make sure I run out to some places and get some things done before it's too late. And yeah, I think I'll call it there. Tomorrow, I don't know what we'll do. Maybe we'll chat in the morning a little bit, and then we'll figure out if I want to get into Meet Year Zero yet, or do something else. I don't know. I just haven't felt like Meet Year Zero, so I don't know 100%. It's just that I haven't felt like getting into that game, and maybe I'll have a lot of fun if I get into it, but just part of me has just not felt like getting into a new game a little too much, and I think the discouragement from Dragon Warrior 4 and what went wrong on, having replayed a big chunk of the chapter for a couple hours kind of sucks. Turned out save states kind of suck in that on the thing I'm using for the randomizer. Turns out they do, unfortunately. But yeah, we'll figure out what we're doing tomorrow morning. I should be back around 10, 11 usually, in between there. Most of the time it's been close to 11, but we'll see if I get a little earlier. Just depends on the morning. I'll make sure to upload this video tomorrow. Yeah. And if you want to see more tabletop stuff, on Thursday, our next day, will be 3 topics for Pathfinder. We're going to talk about androids, Magnamar, and Corvosa. Cool. We'll go for all 3 of those. So we're going to go to the 2 cities, and then androids are good. Androids shouldn't be too long. And then Magmar and Convosa will go over the 2 city-states and their regions. And then Saturday will be the Ashketic Brotherhood. We're going to start mages and do traditions. Oh, that's right. I was going to start mages and do traditions. Neat. Yeah. Alright. I'm going to say bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Let me just check if there's anybody doing tabletop that I can do. If there's no one doing tabletop, I'm not going to raid anybody. I know that I'm going to do tabletop for Tuesdays. So, if we don't get that, we don't get that. I don't see any of my normal tabletop folks. Anybody that I could read? No. Do I see any? No. Yeah. We'll call it that. Alright, bye everybody.